We lost Martin Luther King Jr. 50 years ago this week. We'll talk about it.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Kind of lamenting on the radio program this week on WPRO weekdays 3 to 6 about leadership in the minority communities, and where's the go-to national player, if at all, locally as well? A couple of issues came down the pike this week that I think are worth sinking our teeth into, but I find myself somewhat mystified about what we're supposed to think about where we go for a voice from the black community specifically. And I think with all the immigration controversy that we've had in the last couple of years, a lot of this conversation has kind of been lost. And with the passing of Martin Luther King Jr. 50 years ago this week, and we have a culture of marking anniversaries. I don't think we'll mark his death every year. He has his own third Monday of January every year, but this was, I think, especially poignant. So Ricardo Pitts-Wiley from the Mixed Magic Theater is a guy I rely on for thinking out of the box on this stuff. He's really brilliant on these issues, and we're going to talk to him tonight. So welcome in on this Friday evening. Glad to have you aboard. A couple of headlines regarding this week, keeping the dream going. And a lot of you are probably thinking, what is this all about? Well, the actual loss of Martin Luther King happened on April 4th, 50 years ago. And other headlines, reflect on, who does what to kind of fill the void, right? Here was some coverage of that from the week.
A half-century to the day since the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Memphis led America looking back.
And I've seen the promised land.
But also looking forward.
Dr. King's dream lives within you, within us.
Dr. King was cut down here in Memphis as he stood on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel. Today, that building is part of the National Civil Rights Museum, host of the commemoration, attracting thousands of visitors like Marjorie Kennard.
It's sort of like going to Mecca. That's the experience I have, coming to Mecca, where people from all over the country are here.
Bells tolled across the country. Americans marked the 50-year milestone with marches and ceremonies. From Atlanta, where Dr. King was laid to rest, to the MLK Memorial in Washington. We shall overcome. And in Indianapolis, where Robert F. Kennedy first announced the assassination.
Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
Civil rights icon John Lewis was there that night and returned for the anniversary.
If it hadn't been for Martin Luther King Jr., I don't know what would have happened to our nation. I don't know what would have happened to many of us.
That's a fascinating question. Welcome, Ricardo. Nice to see you again.
Glad to be here.
It's a fascinating question. If not for him, what would have happened? I was asking this week, since he's been gone, who's making it happen?
Well, I want to.
Is that a fair question?
Yes, it is. I want to go back and address your opening comment about the lack of leadership in the African American community, the lack of.
I'm not saying it is. I have a trouble wrapping my mind around it.
Well, it's a question that the African American community is asking also, but you have to put it in a broader context. If nothing else, this last presidential election showed a lack of leadership, of significant and well-defined leadership, not just in the African American community, but the entire American community. I mean, if you look at the debates and the arguments and I mean 16 candidates, all of which none of them represented anything really, the majority of anything. It's a leadership problem across the board. Now,
I think that's true. I agree with you.
In the African American community, what we have to do better, and it's happening in the greater community, maybe not as quickly, is we have to pass the torch successfully to another generation, a new generation that's energized, that's bright, that is is armed with significant knowledge, but not necessarily significant background. The American story has been so distorted in the last 25 years. It has driven good people away from politics. It has driven, it has taken the air out of the room of so many issues, because either become temporary issues. See, the significant thing about the civil rights movement, and I'm a stone cold admirer of Martin Luther King and his legacy, but I'm also a stone cold admirer of the army of people that made it happen too, because they're just as important as he was. But those people realized it was not a sprint, but a marathon. The civil rights movement was going to take a long time. People were going to have to stay in it for a long time. They were going to have to be willing to risk themselves, like John Lewis, for a long time. But the assassination of King, in some way, seemed for some people to mark the end of that movement, when it really wasn't. It should not have been. It's an ongoing.
The end because he was so important and it was preempted, or the end because things had been achieved?
Nothing had really been achieved, but he was so clearly the leader of the movement that when he was assassinated, it seemed as if that ended the movement. His death was the death of the movement also, because he was so prominent. He was so.
So who gave up? Who gave up on the movement? If the perception was that it ended, was it Black America? Was it America in general? What was it?
Well, you got to keep in mind, his assassination came at a crucial time in American history that was also accented by the Tet Offensive and the reaction to the Vietnam War. The Southern strategy.
It was busy.
It was busy. The Southern strategy for that Republicans instituted to marginalize the African American vote and poor people's votes was enforced. Richard Nixon brought in a law and order. The Great Society was being dismantled. I mean, it wasn't, and the African American population was also responding to being tired of having to wait and ask for things that should have been automatically part of our rights as U.S. citizens to be delivered. So you had a lot of things going on at one time. Robert Kennedy was assassinated. The violence in this country was, the riots, the war. There was so much going on that the movement, in a sense, got drawn into the maelstrom of a whole lot of upheaval in this country. And keep in mind, the civil rights movement also didn't just give birth to African Americans' viewpoints on issues. It opened the door for the women's movement. It opened the door for the gay rights movement. It opened the door for the immigrant movement. It opened it. So a lot of people got drawn into the vortex, and it was going to take another 25 years for things to get to a point where we can look back at history and say, you know what? We had a chance to do some things and we missed it, but it's coming back. It's got to come back. 50 years after the King assassination, keep in mind, the circumstances around the King assassination, it's not ironic, it's not an accident that it came almost immediately after he spoke out against the Vietnam War. His protection was stripped away from him. And because Johnson did not want to see something happen to him on his watch until he came out against the war. Because Johnson was passing civil rights legislation, historic civil rights legislation, but the mortgage, the mortgage that the African American community had to pay for the Vietnam War was the greatest single catastrophe in our history, other than slavery.
All right, when we come back, I want to talk about whether King's message has been enough through this? Next.
We should take what victories we achieve, secure them, and then build on them, always refusing, as Dr. King did, to accept what he called the isness of today and keep pushing towards the oughtness of tomorrow. We can't be trapped or discouraged by what is. We've got to keep pushing for what ought to be. An economy that works for all our people, a government that lives up to our highest ideals, an America worthy of our children's expectations.
Yeah.
You know, I said on the radio this yesterday, or this is Friday. We always tape the Friday show on Thursday. The president is the next, I don't know, for lack of a better term, this term will bother people, but I'm going to use it anyway, iconic figure in the civil rights movement, in the sense that that threshold was finally broken with the election of a black man to the presidency. So, and his point, and you're nodding, so I want you to reflect on what he had to say, but what I was going to ask prior to the break is what King said all during his time enough, in that the interpretations, you're still doing theatrical interpretations of his work at the Miss Magic Theater. And by the way, coming up in the next segment, we'll tell you what's going on at the theater, something that you ought to check out, and it'll be on foxprovidence.com. We always like to link in what Ricardo's doing artistically, and everything is open to the public. It's in a sense, and again, the comparisons might ruffle some feathers, but I'm not going to worry about it. It's not a direct analogy, but it's almost like gospel, in the sense that Christ lived, and the messages live. And is that enough? Was it enough in terms of looking for the leader that continues? Was that?
Well, if you look at the messianic comparison,
right?
Well, it's not totally wrong. I'll put it that way. If you look at,
I'm not trying to create him as a deity.
No,
I'm just trying to set the formulas.
But the messianic comparison is not far off, because if you keep in mind, the growth of the Christian faith happened after the assassination of their leader, of that leader. Now, looking at King, I'm not trying to make King a Christ-like figure, but I am saying, 50 years after his assassination, that now we get to judge the true essence of what he was trying to say, and not try to measure him just as a man, but measure his message. And so much of the work that I've been doing at Mixed Magic Theater, we've been doing at Mixed Magic, is to not only pass on that message to another generation, not just black kids, white kids, Hispanic kids, Asian kids need to know that message too, because it's a great American message. And we love to take the soundbite out of what he was saying, but we don't look at the depth of what he was saying. What he was railing against not only was racial injustice, he was railing against economic injustice. He was railing against things that hold nations back. You know, the March on Washington speech, I Have a Dream speech, was an economic speech. The letter from Birmingham City Jail was an economic speech as much as anything. The hope lied in everyone's ability to be a contributor to the culture, but also be rewarded for being a contributor to the culture. What he was talking about was radical in many ways. You know, he was a peaceful man. He was a man of peace, but he was also out ahead of the curve about, and a warning, I mean, a cautionary tale. Read the letter from Birmingham City Jail. It's a cautionary tale. It's saying, hey, look, if you don't watch yourself, if you don't take care of the great human things that we ought to be doing, if you don't adhere to the principles that you say you believe in, you're going to run into problems. And we are now dealing with some of those problems in a way.
And who's leading through some of those problems? So that's the premise of my question. This is fascinating background, and you kind of when you talk about King as the central figure here, and the message is still living and providing like new nuance today. I'm just asking the question: what is he enough, and was he enough? Because I don't see the president aside. It's kind of a different dynamic. I don't see anybody else creating the messaging that we keep referring back to, and I don't know whether that's a deficit or not.
Well, we're a country that reacts to. We're a reactionary country. You know, the assassination of Emmett Till jump-started some things. The insistence of Rosa Parks, who was not first by any stretch of the imagination, to jumpstart the Montgomery bus boycott. You know, we could go over and over. You know, many things that jump-started the movement. If we keep waiting for some great tragedy to jumpstart a movement, we're always going to be waiting for the next tragedy. The Parkland shooting in Florida jumpstarted something. But why did it take 17 people to jumpstart a discussion on?
And it may not.
And
it may not.
But one of the things that when that happened, I said to myself, these kids have no idea what they're up against. The opposition is well moneyed, well organized, and it also sees it as a
well.
marathon,
I wouldn't want to
sprint.
project that there's a figure still alive today that, if taken by the wrong means, would create the kind of crisis and new revelation. I mean, that's I certainly wouldn't be hoping for that. But I don't think you've answered the question directly. I might not have asked it correctly. Is it important to have identified? Is there someone to identify? Will it be somebody to identify that measures up to that which Martin Luther King provided? Yes or no?
At this juncture, I can't say I know that person. At this juncture, I would also say, do I believe those people are going to emerge? I absolutely believe that.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk about whether there's any evidence of that nationally or even locally. Stay with us. Representative Anastasia Williams from Providence rang the bell a little bit this week when she went to the House Judiciary Committee asking, promoting a bill which is simply this. Let me read it to you. Notwithstanding any provisions, whenever a judge from the Superior Family District Traffic Tribunal, Workmen's Compensation, or Municipal Court who is a person of color leaves the bench for whatever reason, their replacement must be a person of color so as not to diminish the number of judges of color in the courts. Okay. In concept, I don't think fair-minded people have a qualm with that. Mm-hmm. It gets to a quota type of accounting. The idea that if you were a judge and you stepped down, I'd have to replace you with a black man or a black person or a person, I'm not sure where the minority or person of color definition is going to be. I'm not sure whether that's logistically sound. And in fact, when I interviewed her yesterday, she backed off it a little bit. She also talked about the problem that too many judges were lynching, her words, defendants of color. Mm-hmm. Well, the word got it. The use of the word certainly got my attention, and so therein lies the rub. Do you have a general feeling about that? And by the way, let me just tell you this: I did some homework on this and found out that there have been significant efforts to recruit judges of color. The problem is there are very many qualified. Right. They don't want to take the gig. They make too much money.
Yes.
That's the truth about what's going on in here right now. So I don't know how you square that.
Well,
and we've got 3.5 minutes to solve.
Okay, because I didn't actually hear her exact comments. I look at the amendment, and my homage and respect to the family of Bill
Judge Clifton.
Judge Clifton.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who just passed, was
very well respected. Who was a well-respected and decent man. You know, the issue that gets clouded in here is we have created a prison industrial complex and a school-to-pipeline complex, which Anastasia, was in a bigger way was trying to address. Who is protecting our kids from a complex that is making money off of their incarceration? Who is trying to break that cycle? And can we depend on a person because they're a qualified jurist? Are they also qualified and interested in making sure that we put an end to the prison industrial complex in this country, which is disastrous? It is. If you go back to the 13th Amendment, there's very little discussion about the 13th Amendment, which ostensibly freed African Americans from slavery and re-enslaved them all in the same breath. And we're living with that right now. And if we don't find a way, if we don't have people in our courts who understand how terrible that is for the African American community, for the people of color communities in this country, then we're going to deal with more problems than we need to, because they could have been solved.
That's a whole, whenever you come, you create a whole other shows. So we'll take that comment, Lex, and we'll make that a foundation for some further discussion in the very near future about the judicial system. I would be remiss if I didn't check in on what's happening at the theater. Mixed Magic Theater is doing what? Real quick, got a minute.
Well, we have 2 weekends of poetry shows. We have a show called Poets on Fire, which is really about exciting the language of poetry and making it accessible to our audiences. We have 2 poetry shows, two weekends of poetry. I participated in both of them on a certain level. And then in May, we opened 2 plays by Zora Neale Hurston, Sweat and the Gilded Sixpence. Zora Neale Hurston is a prominent African-American writer who has a new book. They just discovered a book of hers that they're re-releasing in May. And then in June, we open up our outdoor theater. We have an exciting sequence of events, including the touring production of the Trinity Reps, production of The Tempest, the Tris production of Hamlet, the David Tessier All-Stars doing Jesus Christ Superstar, which I'm happy to say that I'm a participant in.
Yeah, who are you?
Caiaphas.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so we have a lot of our 11th annual gospel concert is coming up, which is always we try to pick a good theme. On Revival Day comes up April 21st at McVinney Auditorium, which we're very excited about, which is a real celebration of the history of African American contribution to gospel music. But then Sankofa is an African word which means go back and bring it to me. It looks back into the past to move into the future.
All right, so all this information is at foxprovidence.com, linking to the Mixed Magic Theater, which you can Google and which you should attend. There's a lot of shows there that you will learn a lot of and have some fun. Thanks, pal. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Final word next. Again, go to foxprovidence.com and check out what the Mixed Magic Theater is doing. A phenomenal work that Ricardo does over there. Coming up on the Monday program, the former colonel of the state police now runs the local YMCA. I'll get his thoughts on law enforcement and some of the programs that he's running in his new gig. That's Monday night. Have a great weekend. Go to the Masters and watch Tiger create history, maybe. See ya.